thank you. So thank you very much for inviting me here to tell you a few words about urban soils. So first of all, I'll explain briefly why I'm interested in urban soils and what I mean by urban soils more precisely. And so this all sprouted from an interest in neglected things and how we come to pay attention to them. And urban soils to me are quite typical of the things that have been neglected by modern thought about nature and the city, to the point that most people find it hard to think of the city as a place where soils occur. So this is just a map of the soils of France, where you see, well, you'll be used to these kind of maps where you see all these different soil types, with different colors for each of them. And then you've got this interesting category here of non-soils, which describes glaciers, cities, and lakes, and these are the grazed areas of the map. So for many soil scientists today, urban soils are regarded as non-soils. They are the soil ersatz, the heavily disturbed remnants of a once natural soil, and we seem to have nothing interesting to learn from them. So starting from this, I was intrigued that a group of soil scientists were defending the development of an urban soil science, wanting, for instance, to have a new soil category recognized for them. And this was notably acted by the appearance, as some of you will know, of the technosoil category in the WRB in 2006. So a pretty good one when talking about rediscovering soils. And I've just given here two examples of these technosoils, the cardic and the ecranic ones. So the general definition of a technosoil is any soil that contains over 20% artifacts into the first meter of depth. So that means that human activities have played a big part in the shaping of these soils. And these two ones are just my favorite ones. The garbic technosoil is a soil developed with a thick layer of waste, garbic from garbage. We can have the ecranic technosoil from the Russian, I think, ekran, the screen, and that is a soil, the upper layer of which consists in technique hard rock such as asphalt or concrete. So what intrigued me is that this opened up the range of things that may register as soils and challenge the ideas of soils as a resource or as something restricted to where we grow food for humans. In this perspective, soils are everywhere in the city. And as one of these soil scientists explained to me, it isn't to say that there is soil under a road. The road itself is a soil, there is a layer that cuts, that gives special characteristics to the soil, but the soil is a whole profile, the road is a surface horizon. So these soils, urban soils, are becoming matters of concern for scientists, but also urbanists and city planners. And from this, a bunch of new technologies of soil construction have emerged. And I will say a few words about them later. So for me, this is an occasion to think, from the point of view of anthropology, what our entanglements with urban soils might be. So the question I'm posing is how current concerns about urban soils allow us to trace certain aspects of the ways in which we shape soils in cities and the way they shape us in return. So the word that I prefer over technosoil to speak about this, and which I've used in the title, is that of urban pedogenesis, which I use in the plural form. And well, you know that pedogenesis in the soil science literature refers to the growth of soils, but I use it as a means here to address the making of urban soils, not in the sense that they're made by humans as if humans superimpose the design of acid matter, but rather, I mean the concrescence, the growing width of soils, of their materials, and the humans whose lives intertwine with them. So during my thesis, which I've actually just defended recently, I did fieldwork in the two French research units that are most active on these questions, one situated in Lorraine, in eastern France, and the other one near Paris, and I will say something a bit later. But as I was doing fieldwork there and learning a lot about these urban soils, I started wondering why they were considered boring and uninteresting to so many people. And I looked into the work of construction historians on the transformation of cities in the 19th and 20th century and the emergence of engineering as the only discipline that could work on soils in cities, mostly with the aim to seal them and to stabilize them as much as they could. Until the 18th century, things had been different. Urban soils were regarded as a danger because of putrid fumes and miasma, and as a source of wealth because very little waste left the city. At the time, most things were reused or transformed within the city, and many people, doctors, miners, or even philosophers, debated about urban soils at length. Then in the 19th century, engineering emerged with the project of rationalizing the city, making it a hygienic space, and without going into many details, the solution they adopted was to seal soils, to separate them from the air and the climate and to transform them into this backstage area for pipes and other networks. Such ideas also bore an ambition of enlightenment for city dwellers, technologies of footwear, the education of posture, and the detached contemplation of landscapes all underwent important development at this period. And I quote here Tim Ingold, who explains that all of these conspired to lend practical and experiential weight to an imagined separation between the activities of the mind at rest and the body in transit, between cognition and locomotion, and between the space of social and cultural life and the ground upon which that life is materially enacted. And this is just an example from the early 19th century of, that comes from the Comte de la Horde, who was the prefect for bridges and roads of the Seine department, which is broadly Paris, during the Restoration era. And he argued that a smooth, hard surfacing meant city dwellers could now lift their eyes and mind for the best benefit of business and trade. And he said, busy people, without having to fix their attention upon the stones they must choose to walk on, shall be able to think freely about their interests and trade, and shall thence augment their conceits. So what makes urban soils so boring to most is that they have been backgrounded, to use a word by Germaine Meulemans. They're framed as a technical problem for specialists, about which lay people don't need to worry. And of course, I'm interested in practices that complicate this question a bit. So let me jump in time to present day to the development of the urban soil sciences. And here's an aerial view of the component of Omécourt in Lorraine, in France. So in France today, such a picture already seems like it is from another age. The plant closed in 1980, hit by industrial collapse in Lorraine. Eager to turn their back to bygone industrial age, the mayor and the region ordered the demolition of the factory in 1985, wanting to requalify the site as soon as possible. The industrial history of Lorraine was over, and its vestige had to be forgotten. A member of a local association told me that many workers cried when they toured on the factory, forgetting the industry also meant forgetting them. A clean layer of topsoil scraped off from a nearby field was brought to the site, and a building was erected in order to attract companies to Omécourt. But on the day the building opened, it was filled by a naphthalene smell, and the developers realized that the site was contaminated with heavy metals poorly contained by the thin topsoil layer, of course. So after years of neglect, a partnership was eventually formed with the GISFI, which is the scientific group on industrial wasteland, which some of you may know, which turned the site into a 2.5 hectare experimental area on soil construction, the largest one in France. So I got involved in this is the site, so it kind of looks like an ordinary meadow, but this is a constructed technosoil, as you might think so. And I got involved in the activities of the team that works there, and followed several of its scientists, notably Geoffroy, who you see on this picture, is one of the soil scientists involved there. So here the constructed soils consist in a mixture of waste and various byproducts, which are organized in a volume and are left to combine and aggregate thanks to the work of water and organisms to develop into a soil. It allows researchers to study the evolution of such materials, so the pedogenesis, if you will, the process by which these materials grow together into something else under the influence of various factors that include the human activities of these researchers. So the soil arrangement put in place in Omécourt are considered particularly interesting for these scientists because they allow to study novel configurations where elements that play certain functions or roles in natural soils are replaced by others. As Geoffroy explained to me, I see we have materials with little clay, so I think let's try to do without clay, and let's see what happens. So in building soils, I sometimes try to reason by analogy with natural soils without wanting to play the sorcerer's apprentice, because it's not the goal, but most often I find it interesting to design completely original soils without trying to reproduce what's in nature. They say these sort of things. So for Geoffroy, to build a soil is not only a way to restore a brownfield, it is mostly a way of doing basic research and to build a potentially surprising compound. Soil construction experiments allow to change the staging of soils in soil sciences and to question them otherwise. This notably comes from an interest in nonlinear ecological dynamics, which critique a fixist approach in the ecological sciences and its focus on the so-called natural environments seen as a fiction from which humans are artificially hosted. If ecological dynamics are not linear, then the future state of a soil cannot be predicted, and the experiment cannot fail because anything that happens will be interesting to follow. And so that leads to a kind of interesting itinerant twist in the way these experiments are led. So at the same time, humans do make a mess, they recognize that, but nevertheless produce interesting things, and the kind of bricolage that they do becomes accepted as soils. So this places humans back into processes of pedogenesis and redefines the ways in which we can get to know soils. We can, I think, relate this to a pragmatist ontology in which, to quote James, what really exists, that's a quote, is not things made, but things in the making. Once made, they are dead, end of quote. And in this, no, we wouldn't need to stand in front of things, but to situate oneself in the making of things. And as Barad argues, quote, we don't obtain knowledge by standing outside of the world. We know because we are of the world, we are part of the world in its differential becoming, end quote. So engaging in soul-forming processes becomes a privileged way to follow pedogenesis. But of course, this is all a bit too nice a picture to cover the full range of contemporary urban soil becomings. Urban soil practices, urban soil sciences practices, find a possible way to relate to soils that I find interesting for the kind of questions we're addressing in this workshop. But they are in tension with more managerial take on the topic, in which the probable becoming of soil construction lies, I think. So if you read the literature on urban soils, you will find that soil construction is growingly promoted within discourses that allude to questions of peak soil and frenetic urban sprawl. As in many of the domains that concern environmental questions, the warnings formulated about soils first stress the excess and rapidity of changes induced by the development of modern societies and cities. These excesses are then highlighted as requiring urgent adjustment, and scientists, thanks to their expertise, are then designated as the best people to manage this change. So the logic is kind of like, very often you'll find things like since 2006, 50% of the Earth's population live in urban area. This is a situation that humanity has never known before, and that threatens stability of the system as we know it. And the result is a call for tighter links between science and governance, and more or less declared calls for more technocratic management of relations between nature, cities, and the economy. In these, constructed soils are regarded as a fertile material that can be grown, transported, and sold. They are marketed as a material of choice for building the green infrastructures that has become trendy recently, such as green corridors, which require enormous amounts of materials to be built, the most expensive and rare of which is topsoil. I looked it up in Sheffield, I think a tall bag of topsoil is between 60 and 80 pounds. So it's also seen as a way to recycle the excavated rubble and demolition material taken out of the city. So this is something that came up in a Paris local newspaper, where they show you all the rubble that will be created by the Greater Paris Project, and it is mounted as higher than the Eiffel Tower. And some people argue that we might as well try to construct soils with that. However, this view of soils as a fertile material that can be grown, transported, and sold contradicts a pedological approach in many ways. What is called soil here would be regarded from the point of view of pedologists as mere earth. I asked one ecological engineer what he thought about the company's hopes to grow soil and then ship it to customers. I asked him whether the soil remains a soil after it has been stripped off and then tossed into a skip. His reply struck me as an example of the difference in view. No, what you have in the skip is earth. A soil is tridimensional heterogeneous volume which functions and as such is also living. It is not the same as earth or as a substrate, which is a homogeneous material that one puts in a flower pot and that might in turn develop into a soil. The soil, he continued, exists only in its integrity. If you cut your hand off, this hand is not a human being but an organ. Likewise, earth is an organ of the soil organism. I'd be interested to know what the soil scientists in the audience think of it. Okay, so just a few concluding words. So in opening up the black box of urban soils, soil ecologists and ecological engineers are currently bringing urban soils out of the realm of street and foundation engineering and maintenance. From a new technical being, they become matters of concern that speak to many for discordant reasons, but often such liberations are only one stage in a process of reappropriation. It invents and changes the rules of the game, but it can easily fall back into a settled territory with its own new constraint that might in turn be resisted. A liberated territory doesn't remain on a fight for long. And as we have seen, the new trope of developing and merchandising constructed soils is it's a daring candidate from defining the new modes in which urban pedogenesis will exist in the future. Yet for the time being, soil construction is still emerging within a moving field constituted of heteroclite practices, one that distributes new roles for responsibilities and expertise and redefines ways of making science. Different ideas and projects coexist and make the future of soil construction both uncertain and interesting to follow. Will it eventually become a fixed solution for peak soil concerns? Will it continue to act as a lure for a new field of soil ecology? Or will it eventually be subconstructed to firms without requiring further pondering? And I'll leave you with these questions. Thank you.
We have 2 minutes for questions, and in the meantime, if I may ask Kate to step forward and follow your presentation. Okay. This is the question.
Oh, I see.
Are you okay to self-facilitate the question?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
As a soil scientist, I'll just say, because you asked the soil scientists to
Yes.
comment, that actually, that for me, that's spot on.
Yeah.
So that idea that the soil needs to be connected to, in all sorts of ways. And actually, I think it's interesting, your technosoil definitions at the beginning, there's a whole discussion in soil science about sealing and whether sealing destroys the soil. And I think there's some quite interesting things about whether the connectivity remains below ground. Actually, is that enough to maintain perhaps some incipient function and so on? And I think there's some really interesting things there that the soil science community is just getting its head around. But I think the thing you asked us to comment on, I think is spot on. So.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Yes.
I enjoyed that, and your concept of urban pedogenesis, you said, suggests that we think about how these soil-making processes are also constitute human subjects, right? Can you talk a little bit about that specific part of your research? What kinds of human subjects are you seeing formed here, and what are some of those dynamics?
The way I was going to allude to that in the presentation was with this idea of soils participating in the production of this subject that's disconnected from the ground, can lay its eyes far upon the horizon without having to negotiate with the land when he walks or she walks and these sort of things. So that's the production of the kind of Baudelarian flaneur that that we heard about is definitely connected to this kind of soil sealing, and the kind of rediscovery of soils and soil construction will definitely bring about some different relations with that. And actually, soil scientists and projects of soil construction are one way of looking at this, but we can also think of projects where buildings are built with a different kind of foundations, which involve a completely different way of building them, or maintaining them, of living in them, and these sort of things. We can think of urban gardening, of course, where reappropriating the soil is a way to grow community as well, and this sort of thing. We'll probably hear some presentations about that. So there's a whole range of things, I think, to explore, and that's only in this urban context where I've been living with it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, thanks.
Yes.
Do you see in your research sort of a change in the idea of when soil is waste and when it's resource, because it's quite a fine line. It depends very much on who's looking at it and what's available.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if my research does that, but the research of the people I've been doing research with definitely does. So when they want to build these soils, what they try to do is to use waste as resource. So, there would be an interesting parallel to explore with this 18th century city where everything was reused, nothing left. There were no big, what do you call that? These technical deposit for waste. I'm not sure what the word is. Yeah, exactly. And lots of people are discussing about turning urban waste into resource. But yeah, there's lots of things to question with that, because that doesn't really question what are we doing with cities. The urban sprawl is not really being questioned with all these things, and then who effectively deals with these things, because it's quite different. It goes into these kind of technocratic fast tracks that I was alluding at, and yeah, is it the only way to do this? It's also still quite relying on fossil fuels a lot, because you need to bring this outside of cities, bring it back to cities, and these sort of things. So, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, indeed, the line is being crossed, but we have to be attentive in the way it is.
It's moving.
Yeah.
I'm curious if in your future projects you want to do something also comparative outside of France, because in a way,
Yes.
especially focusing on urban soils, you talk about this 19th century rationalization of the city,
Okay.
which is a very French project.
Yeah,
So I would like to see differences.
yeah, it is. Oh, you mean the historical part?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. I think you could probably draw some similar conclusions if you were looking at London, for instance.
Yeah.
But it would be, yeah, I would actually love to look at different cities like Mexico, with this absolutely intense urban sprawl and that's been built on a wetland basically that has been completely reclaimed. It would be really interesting to look at other things, but also for this whole development of the urban soil science, as I call them. There's lots of differences. So this, as far as I'm aware, this construction trend is present in France, in the US, and in a few other countries. But in Germany, they'll have a more classifying approach and try to draw maps of all the urban soils that you can find in a city, so that's also a quite interesting thing to compare. And I've applied for postdocs where I might be able to do that.
We're rooting for you.
Thanks, Germaine. We've got a couple of questions on the stage, but we have lots of coffee breaks, so there will be a chance to chat.
Thank you very much.